Saint Sebastian, martyr. Sebastian, son of a military and noble family, was originally from Narbona, but had been educated in Milan. He became captain of the first cohort of the Praetorian Guard. He was respected by all and appreciated by the emperor, who did not know his quality of a Christian. He complied with military discipline, but he did not participate in idolatry sacrifices. Furthermore, as a good Christian, he exercised apostleship among his peers, visiting and encouraging incarcerated Christians for Christ. This situation couldn't last long. It was reported to the emperor. Maximino called him, touched his behavior, and forced him to choose between being his soldier or following Jesus Christ. Sebastian didn't hesitate. He chose Christ's militia. Desired of the emperor, he threatened him with death. Christian Sebastian, converted to a soldier of Christ by confirmation, stood firm in his faith. So, enraged Maximino condemned him to death of hunger. Sagittarius took him to the stadium, stripped him, tied him to a pole, and threw a rain of setes on him, and they left him there for dead. According to the account of his martyrdom, his friends who were lurking approached, and seeing that he was still alive, picked him up, and took him home to a Roman Christian noble, called Irene, who kept him hidden in his house, and healed his wounds until he stayed restored. His friends advised him to be absent from Rome, but he didn't want Sebastian, because he had already become fond of the idea of martyrdom. He unexpectedly presented himself to the emperor, who was puzzled because he thought he was dead. Sebastian vigorously reprimanded his behavior for persecuting Christians. Maximino had him beaten to death. This time the soldiers fulfilled the task without mistakes and threw their bodies into a slab. Christians picked him up and buried him in the Via Appia, in the famous catacomb named after Saint Sebastian. Pretty soon he'll surrender to him. Saint Gregory the Great considered him the third patron saint of Rome after Saints Peter and Paul, being widely celebrated throughout the West on January 20, although in the East he is commemorated on December 18. The main center of his cult in Rome was located in the catacombs of the Via Appia, because there it is remembered by the Deposition Martyrum that I mentioned earlier, and this is confirmed by the Liber Pontificis and by the Roman itineraries. There, on the Via Appia, in the 4th century, the Basilica in Memoria Apostolorum is built, a basilica that changes its name in the 9th century, calling itself San Sebastian. Pope Eugene II on December 9, 826 sends relics to Saint Medard de Soissons. Gregory XIV, who succeeded him as pope, put his head in the oratory of Saint Gregory in the Vatican. This relic of the skull of Saint Sebastian was later taken by Pope Saint Louis XIV to the Roman Church of the Four Crowned Saints, where he is currently venerated. In the Vatican there were other relics of the saint, but in the year 1218, Pope Honorius III gave them to the Cistercians, who were the custodians of the Roman Basilica of San Sebastian, and there they are, the Basilica of San Sebastian Extramuros, Rome. The basilica stands where, according to tradition, the remains of St. Peter and Paul were taken during the Christian persecution. That's why the original name of the church was Basilica Apostolorum, before it was dedicated to St. Sebastian, buried in the catacombs below, at the end of the 3rd century, for fear of an attack by the Saracens, in the year 826, and the remains of the saint were transferred to the Basilica of St. Peter, and it was a hit, since the attack did indeed take place, leading to the destruction of the church. The basilica was later rebuilt by Pope Nicholas I, while the altar of the martyr was reconsecrated by Pope Honorius I at the request of the Cistercian monks, who were given the task of taking care of the church. The elegant facade, the work of Giovanni Vicenzio, is composed, at the bottom, by a 3-arched portico supported by Jonic granite columns, to which, at the top, are corresponded 3 large windows. The interior of the church, with a single nave, features a beautiful wooden ceiling carved also by Vicenzio with the emblems of Cardinal Borghese and Pope Gregory XVI. On the right is the Chapel of Relics, decorated in 1625, in which the original stone is preserved with the footprints of our Lord in his appearance to the Apostle St. Peter, who Vedas Domin. one of the arrows that martyred Saint Sebastian and part of the column to which the saint was tied during his martyrdom. The Albani chapel, on the other hand, was built in 1716 under the order of Pope Clement XI by Carlo Marato, Alessandro Speccia, Filippo Berigini, and Carlo Fontana. Square floor with abside and dome, it is decorated with works by Pier Luondesi and Giuseppe Passeri. In this chapel, the head of Saint Fabian is worshipped. Pope Saint Fabian was one of the first victims of the persecution of Decius, who considered him a personal enemy and rival of him. Saint Fabian suffered martyrdom on January 20, 250, being buried in the catacombs of San Callisto. The sarcophagus of Saint Fabian was discovered in 1915 in the catacombs of San Callisto. De Rossi was the one who achieved such an event by being able to translate the epitaph, Fabian, Bishop and Martyr. On the left, in correspondence with the crypt below, is the chapel of San Sebastian, designed by Sir Ferry in 1672. Here is a reclining statue of Saint Sebastian, masterpiece, by Giuseppe Giorgetti, disciple of Bernini. On the altar of this chapel are the relics of the Holy Martyr. To finish, halfway between the chapel of the relics and the chapel of Albani, the staircase that leads to the catacombs of San Sebastian opens.